Saying all of that, I will move on. Sustainability. We're all consumers. I don't know if anybody understands what sustainability is in terms of animal production, but and when you go and buy meat at the counter, what you're thinking, sustainability is. Probably to simplify it, I will put it into these 4 columns that obviously to produce sustainably, farmers need to turn a profit. Without a profit, there's no food. What we notice more and more on the increase is the focus on animal welfare. I mean, I think that we all agree that if we're going to produce animals for meat consumption, the least we could offer them is a life worth living. So therefore, there is more and more focus on animal welfare, and as such, animal health. The two, in a way, go hand in hand. What you tend to notice, and certainly very much so in the UK, top production in the UK, farmers tend to focus on animal welfare first, with the realization that if the animals experience good welfare, then production itself will improve, because a healthy animal is going to perform a lot better than a not so healthy animal. And the last cornerstone, of course, which is what I'm going to focus on now, is the environment. It's very important that, not only in terms of sustainability is the farmer remains in a healthy business, the animals have a life worth living, but at the same time, we should also protect the environment. Without a planet in the future, there will be no us. The idea that we could bring all of that together, certainly in terms of informing the consumer, not that anyone particularly looks closely at their food labeling, but if you sort of turn over a pack of chicken and you scan, it'll tell you a lot of information about what sustainability apparently is, but actually, usually a lot of that information is not based on objective facts. It's usually based on the idea of. So going on about the environment, and hopefully answering one of Ed's first questions, this is a screen from a report that we produce when we assess farms' environmental criteria. And what you see here is a breakdown between the top 2 zones is the emissions, the pollution that's created from a farm. The big bit in the middle, as I'd like to say, the elephant in the room, is the feed consumption. How the animals need to consume feed to grow, and that comes at an environmental cost. And then the little bit down, the blue bit at the bottom, is more about the environmental impact of breeding animals to produce them for meat. Okay, so in a minute I'll show you a screen of the impact of the technology I'll talk about in terms of reducing emissions, but I would like to put this screen in a little bit of context. I mean, it's pretty well documented that in terms of food carbon footprint, about 60% of that comes from animal-based products. There's no question that producing meat protein has a higher impact than kind of vegetables and plants. However, if we put it in the context, and I've pulled these figures off the internet, a typical European will probably consume about 50 kilograms of meat a year. So if we base that just on pigs and chickens, and we look at this graph, this column, the first left benchmark column, 4.18 kilograms of carbon produced to deliver 1 kilogram of chicken meat, right? Then we can assume that the average consumer in Europe today, Western Europe today, their meat consumption will produce around 200 kilograms of carbon footprint, okay? But if we put it in the context of how much carbon we are producing per capita, and this is very much an average, around 10 tons of carbon a year, or 10,000 kilograms, then putting animal production in the context of our overall carbon footprint, still it's relatively small. There's no reason why we should still address this, but it is relatively small. And I always sometimes mention that a cat, for example, produces 310 kilograms of carbon and a dog 440. So that somehow puts meat production in context, but that's not to say that we shouldn't be doing something about it, okay? This is just a slide focusing on the emission bit, because that's an important part of the discussion. This is just a graph of the impact of air scrubbing on ammonia abatement. So air scrubbers tend to deal with ammonia reduction, dust reduction, and odor reduction. They are the three main pollutants from pig and poultry production. The preamble to this, Fiona asked me, was I going to talk about methane? I'm not going to talk about methane today, only to say that we are looking at it. There's nothing conclusive that's been decided on how we will deal with methane. It's a kind of more watch this space. I mean, there are some technologies out there that they're experimenting with, but you know, they haven't quite got there yet. So, oopsie, oh dear, what happened there? Let me jump back. Sorry, that's the wrong button. So in terms of emissions, we can significantly reduce emissions. And, you know, if we look at the dust graph, which I won't go into the other graphs now, I have a report which I can share with you and goes into a bit more detail. You know, we can make some significant improvements in terms of how we reduce emissions. And this graph, just quickly, this is a more detailed, the protocol that we use to measure carbon footprints. So it's everything from, you know, particulate matter, as I say, dust, terrestrial acidification, so sulfur dioxide, phosphorus, nitrogen, the whole range of elements that we emit from farm production that create emissions and pollution.